Donald Trump has said that nothing can be done by America's three biggest trading partners, Canada, Mexico and China, to forestall Washington's stringent trade tariffs due to come into effect on Saturday. There would be a tax of 25% on Canadian and Mexican imports and 10% on Chinese goods. North Korea has dismissed as nonsense comments from the American Secretary of State Marco Rubio, calling the country a rogue state. In its first criticism of the Trump administration, Pyongyang's foreign ministry said the US had no right to judge other countries.
Donald Trump has paused the imposition of trade tariffs on Canada for a month. Justin Trudeau's government has agreed to reinforce the border to combat illegal migration and the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Mr. Trump said he was very pleased. A similar deal was announced with Mexico hours earlier. Both Canada and Mexico had been threatened with 25% tariffs from Tuesday.
The U.S. Postal Service has announced a temporary halt to the shipment of packages from China. The move is thought to be related to a decision by President Trump to tighten the rules on which Chinese goods are subject to tariffs.
Beijing has filed a formal complaint against Washington at the World Trade Organization over tariffs. China strongly denies claims by Donald Trump it's fueling an illegal drugs emergency in the U.S.
The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has told business leaders that Donald Trump is serious about wanting to make Canada a US state. Mr. Trudeau said the threat to absorb Canada was a real thing, motivated by a desire to get hold of its mineral wealth.
In the same interview, President Trump said if the people of Canada chose to become the 51st state of the United States, it would be the greatest thing they could ever do. Canada has rejected any idea of joining the US.
A consortium of investors led by Elon Musk has offered to buy OpenAI for $97 billion. Responding on X, the OpenAI boss, Sam Altman, said, "No thank you."
Ukraine's president has told a British newspaper he'd be willing to swap territory with Russia in the event of negotiations to end the war. Volodymyr Zelensky said Kursk, which was seized by his forces 6 months ago, could be handed back in exchange for Russian-occupied territory in Ukraine.
President Trump has said he plans to meet Vladimir Putin in person, reversing years of US isolation of the Russian leader. He was speaking hours after he held a 90-minute phone call with Mr. Putin, in which he said they had agreed to work closely to end the war in Ukraine. US officials have said the American Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead a high-level delegation in direct talks with Russian officials on ending the conflict in Ukraine in the next few days in Saudi Arabia. The American Special Envoy, Keith Kellogg, said the US, Russia and Ukraine would be directly involved in peace talks, but Europe would not be invited.
The South Korean authorities say they've temporarily suspended the local service of the Chinese artificial intelligence app DeepSeek over concerns about its data collection practices. Officials said the service would be resumed after improvements and remedies were made in line with the country's privacy laws.
European leaders have stressed the need to take responsibility for the continent's security following emergency talks in Paris in response to a decision by the United States to hold direct negotiations with Russia about the war in Ukraine.
The United States and Russia have agreed to form teams to begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. The move follows a meeting in the Saudi capital Riyadh on Tuesday, to which neither Ukraine nor the European Union were invited.
The Vatican says the Pope's health has worsened in the past 24 hours and has described his condition as critical. He's being treated for pneumonia in both lungs at a hospital in Rome, where he's spent 8 nights. The Vatican says Pope Francis remains in a critical condition but hasn't had any further respiratory attacks. The 88-year-old is spending a 10th night in hospital, where he's being treated for double pneumonia.
Singapore's largest bank, DBS, says it expects 4,000 roles to be cut over the next 3 years and replaced by artificial intelligence. It's one of the first major banks to divulge the impact of AI.
Ukraine has agreed a deal to allow the United States to jointly exploit its mineral resources, a key demand of Donald Trump, who wants Kyiv to repay US military aid. The deal includes none of the security guarantees Kyiv wanted. South Korea's spy agency says North Korea has deployed more troops to Russia to fight in its war against Ukraine. It said the soldiers had been sent to battlegrounds in Russia's Kursk region, which is partly occupied by Ukrainian troops.
시청해 주셔서 감사합니다. 다음 시간에 뵙겠습니다.